So, friends, good morning and welcome to this lecture series of geomorphology. Today, we will continue with this geomorphology through seismic profiles, that is called seismic geomorphology. So, if you remember our last class, we are talking about this process product relationship in a geomorphic environment, and in seismic profile we generally get the products and we interpret the process from the seismic profile, and in a seismic profile of considerable length and a considerable depth, we interpret the lateral change in geomorphological process, similarly vertical change in geomorphological process. That means, with time and space, how the geomorphic processes that evolved that can be interpreted from these seismic profiles, either it is a 2D or it is in 3D scale. So, today and in this class we are going to discuss that how it happened, how is geomorphologist that interpret a seismic profile. So, it is best described in this workflow. So, here the most workflow designed to derive stratigraph insight from 3D seismic data involve an internal reconnaissance initial reconnaissance step. Reconnaissance step means then every geological work, either it is a geological mapping or anything, we go for reconnaissance survey. Reconnaissance, that means it is a first look, first instance how this area looks like, how the things looks like. So, this is reconnaissance step. So, here in the seismic profile also seismic interpretation, as a geologist or an earth scientist, first the reconnaissance step or the reconnaissance survey goes on. Commonly, the interpreter will quickly scan through a 3D seismic volume by inline, cross line and time. Inline, cross line and time, we know the time is always vertically, it is time. Similarly, it is inline or it is cross line. So, that means in a seismic cube given to an interpreter, the first he has to rotate like this in an angle, and at the first instant how it is look like, that is the reconnaissance survey. And an experienced geologist in the first instance he can interpret a lot, or if you do not have any geological knowledge or geological background, even if these features are clearly shown, but it is very difficult to correlate, or if it is looking either it is geological or not. So, here commonly the interpreter will quickly scan through a 3D seismic volume by inline, cross line and timeline. So, here with vertical changes, lateral changes and longitudinal changes, how these changes is there, whether the change is there or not, that can be interpreted from the first recognition survey or from the first look. So, here it is a workflow or some processes involved. Here it is given, we have the seismic cube and this is the cube of the seismic given to you. First it is there is geophysical processes like processing, it is transformation, then sequence stratigraphic information, that will go for inversion, then it is geomodel, that is well correlations. That means different type of work, that means subordinate works are involved in the interpretation of a seismic cube in a proper manner. So, the objective is to identify anomalous seismic features referred to as FLT. FLT means it stands for funny looking things. Funny looking things, it sounds funny, but it is important. Typically, FLTs or funny looking things include local amplitude brights and dims. As we know, in the last class we are talking something about wherever there is an amplitude change, either this amplitude change may be due to lithology or due to fluid content, it may be due to density. So, that means everywhere there is a change in amplitude in a seismic profile once it is moving from surface to depth. So, here the typical FLT includes local amplitude brights or dims, lineaments, or in general any features that might look geological. That is very much important. Look geological, if you want to interpret this image for example. So, at a first look I can say that yes, that is looking like a fold or something. At first instant is looking like a fold, but whether it is a fold or not, that will be discussed later. But at first instance, if you have some geological knowledge, that it looks like yes, it is a fold, is not it. So, that means features that look geological, that is important, and that look geological, that comes in our mind as a geologist. So, we should have sound geological knowledge, sound geomorphological knowledge or depositional systems knowledge, or the interpreter should have enough knowledge to interpret these features which are looking from as funny looking thing as Raphelti, it should look geological. So, that means geological process involvement, geological features, and interpreter should have sound knowledge on that. Otherwise, everything which is in front of you, it may be a very useful thing, but it is useless until unless we interpret it properly. So, that means this look geological, it comes from your mind, it should look geological. Here for example, some look geological point of view, you can say, here if you see, suppose it is a river system and it is distributing. So, now in a plan view, in a seismic section, in a plan view, that means in inline and that is in cross line view, if you see here, so that means how it is looking, it is branching out. So, that means it is looking like a deltaic system, is not it. Similarly, here it is looking like a meandering river system, here it is a fault, here it is a stratigraphic sequence, there is a sequence stratigraphic, here we have some paleo channels. So, that means these features, they are the look geological features. So, until unless we are able to distinguish these look geological features, how the geological processes is involvement is there, which geological process or involvement is there to make this type of structure. If we do not have enough knowledge about this, that means we can miss it very easily. Usually, it is the amplitude extremes that are rendered opaque, thus allowing the targeted opaque features to stand out. Generally, in standard operating procedures, what we generally do, the extreme amplitudes, either it is a high amplitudes or these low amplitudes. So, these features that is rendered opaque. So, that means we make it opaque and other become transparent. So, that these opaque features that can be spatially correlated, temporally correlated, in which way it is behaving, either it is coming as look geology, either it is coming in a channel with these opaque features. If I joining these opaque features, are they looking any geological objects, is there resembling any geological object. So, that means if it is looking, that means we are able to further going, we can go further interpretation which type of geological feature is looking, either it is looking channel wise, it is looking a fault, it is looking a fold, it is looking a unfold like. So, that means first we make it opaque, and this opaque material, how that is arrangement is there, how geologically it is resembling, that will lead to further exploration, further interpretation. So, once an FLT is defined, it becomes the focus of further detailed analysis that we have already discussed in a horizontal slicing, in vertical slicing and many others. So, in different, suppose we are getting, so for example, here we are getting a channel like objects here, and we are getting, so that means this channel like objects we have to make it slices, that means one time slice, another time slice, and a third time slice, fourth time slice, and looking vertically. In looking vertical, that means to what extent the channel is confined, to up to what depth the channel is confined, whether there is an evolution of this channel. And similarly, if you are looking, you are cutting a slice, we are looking horizontally also. We are looking horizontally from which direction, from which distance to which distance this channel is migrating. So, that means the flood plane geometry, vertically the channel geometry, this involvement of the evolution of this channel, the evolution of the flood plane, that can be interpreted from this type of materials. Another reconnaissance approach involved opacity, that is rendering whereby this 3D volume is rendered transparent except for specific amplitude volume values associated with particular targets such as the channel field deposits. So, that means here if you see, this is a channel field deposit, and here everything is everything is opaque except this one. So, once we are making it this, so that means how a particular geologically looking object, a particularly geologically looking feature, how it is behaving, its lengthwise it is depth wise, it is lateral behavior, that can how it is behaving, that can be interpreted very easily. The key to each of this analysis is to look for and recognize geologically or geomorphologically meaningful patterns. This is very important. Only getting an opaque object is not enough. How geologically and geomorphologically it is making any meaningful pattern in plan view as well as a section view. So, as we have discussed here in a section, how from what depth to what depth it is continuing, and what is this behavior, whether this one suppose it depth wise is continuing, whether the channel width remains same throughout the depth, or it is decreasing or it is increasing, the valley width is to depth ratio, it is increasing or it is decreasing. Similarly, here at this plan view, whether the valley width is increasing in a particular slice, or the value in this subsequent slices, whether this valley width is decreasing or increasing. Similarly, the plot plane width is increasing or decreasing. So, that means in meaningful geomorphological interpretation should come out, otherwise getting an opaque object, opaque FLT is not enough. So, how geologically we are correlating, how geologically we are interpreting this thing, that is meaningful. Such patterns can take the form of fluvial or deep water channels, slumps and slides, self sediment ridges, carbonate patches and reefs, etc. That means these patterns, this whatever the FLT we are getting out, how geologically we are interpreting it, that is meaningful. For the geomorphological approach, the seismic interpretation to succeed, it is essential for this interpreter to have broad experience base with respect to seismic plan view and section view expressions of variety of depositional elements. So, until unless we have sound knowledge about the geology with the geomorphology, with the depositional features, with the tectonic features, that means we are missing or we are not competent enough to interpret the seismic section. So, until unless we interpret it properly, that means very meaningful things, meaningful objects we can miss or we misinterpret to something x, sometime x. For example, here it is contour rising base level. So, here that means we can misinterpret as a fold, if it is looking like a fold we can misinterpret. Similarly, here that is overlying surface is there or truncation is there, that is onlap, that is downlap, the truncation. Similarly, we have depositional environment, we have fluvial depositional environment, we have marine depositional environment, equestrian depositional environment, because each of this depositional environment, each geomorphic process, they have a unique pattern of deposition, unique pattern of formation of landforms. So, once we are not able to interpret these processes and we are rather we misinterpret these processes, that means we are not doing nothing. So, that means we should have proper or sound geological knowledge and sound geological knowledge of correlating these things, these patterns to a particular geomorphic process, particular depositional process, that is important. Until unless we have that interpretation capability or that means correlation capability, we are not doing it properly. So, that means a seismic interpreter must have sound knowledge about this geomorphic as well as depositional processes. For example, if one is not familiar with the stratigraphy and geomorphology of fluvial point bars, then features like scroll bars in plan view and lateral accretion in the section view may pass by the interpreter unnoticed. So, that means if we do not have enough knowledge, we may misinterpret, or even if we do not interpret it, we may neglect the thing, we may ignore these things. Analysis of section view integrated with plan view images represent the integration of seismic stratigraphy with seismic geomorphology. So, seismic geomorphology and seismic stratigraphy, they are interlinked, because seismic stratigraphy is a product, but seismic geomorphology is a process. Similarly, geomorphology is a process and depositional system is a product, is not it? An equally critical step in seismic geomorphological analysis is the integration of borehole data if available, to validate it, because whatever the seismic, whatever the GPR we are doing, this is the indirect method, because we are not able to see what is happening in the subsurface. But if we have that, not necessarily, but if we have this borehole data, that means this borehole data can be correlated to validate our systems, will validate our interpretations. So, here some of these examples how the seismic geomorphology and system stratigraphy is involvement is there. So, here is the product, it is in front of us, and these are this product that is from the depth, it is in seismic profile, and this is the interpretation, and here these are the geomorphic processes that are responsible for this formation of this type of depositional pattern. So, that means now we have this one, and we have through our seismic profiles, we have a seismic study, we are getting this one, we are interpreting this one, and we are correlating with the geomorphic processes. So, this is a complete cycle how a geomorphic or a seismic profile can be interpreted and can be correlated with the corresponding geomorphic process. Now, what is its use? It should have used something. So, the use of seismic geomorphology, use first is the paleooceanography. Paleooceanography means that is oceanic circulation, that is exposure of continental shelf, is not it. So, that means what is involvement is there in the what is how this marine geomorphic process they change with time, that is the paleooceanography. So, paleooceanography is a discipline essential to the understanding of past climate change, paleo circulation pattern, and water mass structure can be constructed through interpreting seismic data across the contourite drift complexes. So, we have seismic data. From the seismic data, we can interpret these contourite drifts, this exposure of shelf, this migration of this change of sea level, this migration of coastline, all those that means all these processes involved in this oceanographic that means it is the oceanic or the coastal geomorphology or the near that means whatever the geomorphic process is involved in this formation of these depositional structures that can be interpreted from this paleo that can be interpreted from this seismic profile. Then second is the paleoclimatology. Newly developing techniques in morphometric analysis from seismic profile or seismic geomorphological features offer promise in better understanding in the nature of paleo drainage and channel changes or channel discharges over geological time. That is, suppose for example, we have a 3D seismic data. Take an example. In a 3D seismic data, we have a channel which is here, the channel width is this much and depth is this much. And with time we are getting this channel is divided here number of channels here, and the channel width and depth it is gradually reducing. So, that means it is an interpretation of climate change. Similarly, suppose depth width ratio is somewhat different and it is increasing here. So, that means it is indicating there is a larger discharge. So, that means larger discharge in the same channel, how it can happen. It is due to this climatic change, it is due to the increasing of rainfall. So, that means by in a vertical scale, that means in the down depth we are going. So, with whatever the changes we are recording in a channel pattern from some depth to some depth. So, that means within that time unit. So, how this climate change is there, how this channel pattern is behaving with that to that climate change, that can be interpreted from here. The potential for reconstructing a region's rainfall and discharge history through analysis of changes of channel orientation, size, width depth ratios and sinuosity for example, may eventually that contribute significantly to more detailed climatic history for regions that is presently archivable. That means, in the past geological history how this channel was behaving with the changed climate, that can be recorded that can be interpreted from this seismic profile. Such enhanced understanding is critical to the commercial success of exploration of this very high cost environmental setting, because why we are doing so? In a fluvial environment, in a marine environment, in deltaic environment, we are doing it due to for our interest in hydrocarbon exploration. So, that means environmental interpretation, particularly the geomorphic and depositional environmental interpretation is must going for any hydrocarbon explorations. So, we are spending crores of rupees, millions of dollars So, until unless we interpret it properly, we do not correlate it properly to a particular geomorphic processes, that means we are lacking something. So, that means it is very much important to interpret the geological objects with the geomorphic processes. Then third is the deep water channel complex. Deep water channel complex, we know we are getting deep water channel complex here, mostly these continental slopes. And if you remember our last class when we were talking about this oil field geomorphology, this 67% of petroleum hydrocarbon, it is coming from this hinge zone. So, that means here we have deep water channel complex, we have turbidites, formation of turbidites from here, and the turbidite is deposited somewhere here. So, that means those environments are commercially important, and commercially important means we are spending crores of rupees or millions of dollars there. So, that means proper investigation in these regions, depth wise as well as laterally as well as time wise, it is very much important for this interpreter. So, that means these areas are commercially very much important, and these processes are very much important to interpret the past geological history as well as that is related to our hydrocarbon exploration purpose. Then biogeography. Biogeography, the athletic seismic data in continental margin around the world affords or to the unprecedented opportunity to understand the geomorphology of exposed shelf and shallow seaways of the world. If you see in the past climate change, when we are talking about the initial classes, many times the sea level fluctuation was there, and even in the last glaciation time, the sea level or this present day coastline, it was 100 meters or so below the present one, or even 1 kilometer below the present one. So, that means it is significant. So, if you go that geological time, so here the whatever this the connecting route through sea shelves, that were much below the present one. So, that means that can be interpreted by biogeographically how what was this past connecting route from one continent to another, or within the continent from one side to another side, they can be interpreted from seismic data. Seismic geomorphology offers an opportunity to redefine the history of low stand shelves around the world and shed great insight into the migration route of the early culture. That is important, migration route of the early culture. That means what is this early civilization time, how these were migrating from one part of this continent to another part of this continent through sea level or near to the sea, that can be interpreted from the seismic data. And this most important one is natural hazard. Natural hazard means tsunami deposit. If you know that in the past in the last class we are talking, depending upon the reflection pattern, we can interpret what type of geomorphological process involvement is there. So, that means if you remember, we are talking about the chaotic pattern. There is a chaotic pattern, there is no proper orientation, no proper arrangement of a depositional system, that is the tsunami deposit, the catastrophic deposit, the landslide deposit. Similarly, seismic geomorphology brought to light a number of catastrophic processes active on margins around the world. Submarine slope failure, that is submarine landslide, have been documented to generate large tsunamis in the coastal regions. 3D seismic geomorphological analysis enable us to investigate these processes like never before, hopefully increasing our ability to predict and mitigate the impact of these events. So, that means these interpretations, it is socially useful, it is commercially useful, it is research wise useful. So, that means this seismic geomorphology is nothing, we are retrieving the geomorphological informations from the seismic profile, either it is 2D or 3D, and we are correlating with the geomorphic process, and we are correlating how the geomorphic process changes with time with vertical scale and lateral and longitudinal scale. So, this is nothing, this we have sufficient, we have sound knowledge of geomorphology, that means we can correlate the products with the process. So, here we can say that the seismic geomorphology is nothing but the retrieving this geomorphological information from the seismic data, either it is 3D cube or is a 2D profile. So, this data we are retrieving, we are correlating with these corresponding geomorphic processes. That means, product is there and it is buried on the subsurface. We are using the seismic techniques to retrieve it in a profile form, and whatever these changes are there in a vertical scale, these changes, the lateral scale, the longitudinal scale, whatever the changes are there, these changes we are retrieving it, and those changes are correlating with the associated geomorphological process, is not it. So, this is the utility of this seismic geomorphology, and mostly the seismic geomorphology we are using for our exploration purpose, mostly the oil exploration, and it is very much interesting to know that without proper interpretation of the geomorphic process, if you are going for this oil exploration or hydrocarbon exploration, that means we are spending millions of dollars without any meaning. So, I think this seismic geomorphology will be very much useful for you to interpret the past geomorphic processes that are fossilized and are recorded in a seismic profile. Thank you very much. Thank you again.